Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second series of our Global In-Market webinar. This particular webinar is focused on the Malaysia market. I'm Ashley Ridley from State Promotions, Department for Trade and Investment, and I'll be your host this morning. As with the last webinar series, we'll hear from South Australia's expert overseas representative. And following this update, we'll be joined by KC, who is the Business Development Manager for Agribusiness, Food and Beverage in Austrade. Just on that mark, we've just had some technical difficulties having KC join us, so he's trying another option. But in the meantime, we'll get started and hear from our overseas representative in Malaysia. So before I introduce you to Adil, a couple of logistical items. This session is actually being recorded and will be uploaded to the department's website. At any time during the webinar, you can ask questions through the question and answer section on the right-hand side of your screen. But please ensure your question is directed to all panelists rather than to one specific person to ensure our moderators can actually see the questions. If we run out of time, we'll include any unanswered questions and the answers onto our website. And lastly, we'll have a 10-second poll pop up at the end of the webinar. Please do take the time to complete this for us to continually improve our communications to you. I'd now like to introduce you to Adil Akbar, South Australia's Senior Business Development Manager in Malaysia. Welcome, Adil.
Thanks, Ashley. Good morning, everyone. It's just past 10 a.m. here in Kuala Lumpur, and we've just completed our 4th week of quarantine, or should I say partial lockdown in Malaysia. So the government have announced an extension of another 2 weeks, so we'll see how it goes. Thanks for giving me the opportunity today to share some updates on the Malaysian market and the current impacts of the COVID-19 in the local industry over here. Just for your information, as of 12:30 p.m. yesterday, there were about 4,987 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Malaysia. About 2,478 has recovered, and there were about 82 deaths. So this session is for me to share with you on how myself as well as Austrade over here and DTI onshore as well, we can support your business, giving you some advice on the local markets over here. And we are always here to connect you to your importers, partners, as well as customers over here. So without further ado, I'll share a bit more on the ground information, specifically what is functioning in the market, what has changed since the last time, as well as some insights and tips on what actions to anticipate for recovery. Just a quick disclaimer as well. Things are changing daily, so what we see today may change within a short period of time. But don't worry, we are always monitoring the situation closely and working with individual clients and customers. And we are always working to triage critical supply chain issues in the first instance, with food and medical supplies being the top of the list. Next slide, please. So in terms of the current market situations in Malaysia, as I mentioned earlier, the movement control order has been extended by another 2 weeks. So it has started from the 18th of March, and it will, as of now, it will end until 20th of April. However, there is still a potential that it may get extended again, or it may end with more strict regulations for social distancing and maybe potentially gradual opening of certain sectors. The government has discouraged mass gatherings for 6 months, and we're not sure yet whether this is how it's going to be enforced later. During this MCO period, as we entered the 3rd phase now, we have seen that during the 2nd phase, which is the first half of April, the Malaysian cases has averaged between 100 to 200 cases daily. And the recovery rate is the good news, where it's amongst the highest in the world at close to 50%. Mortality rate has also been kept to a minimum at below 2%. As of yesterday, Philippines has overtaken Malaysia in having more cases Not to say that there's no increase in cases in Malaysia, there is still. However, it's been sustained incremental rather than exponential as of now. During this MCO third phase, which is for the next 2 weeks, it's still just only essential services that can operate. Some sectors are allowed to operate as well, especially during this third phase. There's additional sectors such as the aerospace industry, the construction projects and services related to construction works, the automotive industries, especially to exports. It's limited to exports, parts and components, as well as after-sales services. Machinery and equipment industries are also allowed to operate. In terms of other sectors, hardware shops, electrical and electronics are also allowed to open, either wholesale or the retail side. There was initial confusion earlier whether hairdressing as well as optometrists are going to open, but the government has recently decided that it will be postponed for now due to concerns on the close proximity. Borders remain closed as of this period, hence Malaysians are still not allowed to exit the country, or foreigners are still not allowed to enter the country as well. Interstate travel requires permission, and from the start of this month, there's been further restrictions in terms of movements, can only be within 10 kilometers from your home. The government has also enforced that only one person can be in the vehicle. Those who do not comply will either be fined or could be arrested as well and charged in court. And there has been numerous cases on this. The situation is, in terms of politics, it's an important factor that we need to understand, because Malaysia had a change of government in early March, as I shared in the previous webinar. However, the politically situation on the ground is still stable. However, there's been some concerns as there's been movements in terms of the politics at both the government and the opposition side. Political appointments are happening with some GLCs. The heads have changed. GLCs are government-linked companies which play a major role in the Malaysian economic sector. There's been some rumors that was mentioned by one of the cabinet minister that all members of parliament from the government side that were not part of the cabinet may be appointed to head GLCs. So there's some concerns on the ground over that in terms of, does this mean that the integrity of the GLCs may be affected? In terms of economic stimulus, the government has announced about 3 times in terms of economic stimulus. The first one was on 27th of February, which is the 20 billion ringgit under the previous government. And then since the MCO has started, the government has added another 230 billion, and recently on the 6th of April, another 10 billion. These 3 phases are not necessarily this is the end. The government is still monitoring the economic situation closely, and depending on what the market needs and what the government can afford, we may see further support from the government side. In terms from the central bank, there's also been assistance in terms of liquidity to the market by reducing the statutory reserve requirement by 1%. I would like to share with you some pictures as well that I've prepared for this webinar. But before that, I'll share with you as well the healthcare system so far has been managing situation very well. However, there has been some strained conditions. Recently, the Director General of Health had mentioned that the PPEs for the healthcare sector can only last roughly However, for the other PPEs, they may need, they are still looking for assistance from the community to donate to the front line. Next, please. So these are some pictures on the strict enforcement by the authorities. In terms of massive roadblocks happening nationwide, as you can see at the back, on the left side is by the police as well as military complementing them. There's enhanced MCO orders at several locations throughout the nation, including in Kuala Lumpur, in the heart of the city itself, where residents of several blocks within the city are not allowed to even exit their building due to high number of cases in their area. The government has started to using drone as well to monitor nationwide to ensure compliance. In terms of the impact of these authorities enforcement, we can see in the next picture that major highways, for example, in Greater KL, is largely empty. We can also see the impact in terms of the Malaysia-Singapore Causeway, where I've shown a before and after picture. It used to be during normal situation, we were talking about massive jams, about 2-3 hours just to cross the causeway. And you can see now after it's mostly just empty. So these are some of the impacts that we can see in the market. There are new ways of shopping as well as a result of this MCO, where some retailers have started to being a bit more creative. For example, the Aeon supermarkets, they have introduced a personal shopper where you can come to the supermarket and let the personal shopper know, give them a list on the items that you are searching for, and you can either sit at the side or you can even wait in your car. And then once they have finished taking all the things that you wanted, they will give you a call to come to the cashier to make payment. This is to reduce terms of crowding in the supermarkets. Some supermarkets are also giving special attention to elderly and vulnerable sector of the societies, where they have special hours, usually at the start of the day, about half an hour or 1 hour, some of them, dedicated just for this group of consumers. As you can see as well on the right-hand side, there's 1 meter of social distancing rule at supermarkets nationwide. Hence, there's also crowd control within the supermarkets. And so we can see there's a long line of queues. So due to this as well, when these consumers are able to go in and to quickly shop the items that they want, if there are particular brand that they like, they are out of stock, rather than they have to queue again and come again next time, they might just switch brands as long as they get roughly what they want. We can see as well there's an increase in digital usage during this period. So some companies have started to utilize more of this. For example, Petronas, the major petrol station in Malaysia, they have now allowed consumers to make payment from the car using the app. This is so that we can avoid using cash due to concerns on contamination on the cash itself when exchanging hands. Some companies have started to introduce new services such as e-hailing services, not just Dago that I shown on the picture, Grab as well as Lalamove has offered this, where they can buy the items that you want, usually small quantities and not too high value. So the rider will purchase your items, and then once they deliver it to you, you can then reimburse them back. Some still accept by cash, but it is also preferred for you to pay via e-wallets to them, and of course tips are encouraged. Some of the other things that we can see is that usually mini markets or even small companies that do not have online presence have suddenly gone onto WhatsApp service and now offering people to order direct through them via WhatsApp, and then they will then deliver it to you. So this, we can see a lot of trends of this happening in the market now. So especially for companies who might not have the expertise or in terms of the financial capability to quickly do an online presence on the internet, they will use WhatsApp or Facebook to quickly accept orders. In terms of current market conditions as well, retail industry has contracted by about 18.8% in Q1. However, food and beverage have done largely well in this area, as well as some areas in the FMCG, especially on pharmaceutical products. Monthly household expenditure has halved, according to the Department of Statistics Malaysia recent release. We are talking about up to 55% households have halved their expenditures. Restaurants and hotels has mentioned decline of sales by 86%. The gainer in these categories are food and non-alcoholic beverage at 27%. Communications and education sector remains unchanged in terms of the spending. Unfortunately, alcoholic beverage and tobacco has also seen a steep decline of 64% as people start to prioritize their spending on essential items and health-related products. The country has roughly segregated the population into three different demographics, which is the top 20% households, middle 40%, as well as the bottom 40%. So based on the Department of Statistics findings, the top 20% of the households have reduced their spending by about 59%, and the middle class by 48% as well, and the other class, the bottom 40%, by 41%. In terms of internet usage, there's been a great increase by about 30%. Mostly is due to video conferencing, online learning, shopping, as well as online gaming. All of this is causing strain on the telecommunications network. Hence, there was a survey and research done which saw a slower internet speed overall, especially on the 4G network. Hence, the government, as part of their earlier stimulus plan, have allocated about 400 million ringgit for network and infrastructure upgrade. SMEs in Malaysia, in general, are well managed and they are focused on their customers. Hence, they are, before this pandemic, as well as before the MCO, most of them are in a good situation when they enter this new scenario. However, despite that, they are facing challenges to adapt to this new normal. Businesses that do not have online presence are facing a lot of sales decline, and they can see that consumers are now more careful in spending. In fact, more than 5 over 10 of consumers in Malaysia are worried about their financials as well as their job prospects. The focus now for consumers as well as a small, medium enterprise are on sustainability in terms of maintaining cash flow as well as savings. Schools will remain closed until the issue is fully under control, the pandemic. This is what the Prime Minister has mentioned just end of last week. Hence, we have seen public exams being delayed, and we are expecting further delays of it, starting from year 3 up till year 11 and year 12. The government has said that they are now going to focus on home-based learning, and due to some rural areas may not have the internet facilities or their network is not as great as the urban areas, the government will start focus a bit on using TV content as well. There's been a lot more innovation on the ground, especially on artificial intelligence by government and businesses to help them to overcome the current situation and see how best they can navigate. Logistics are facing heavy strain, especially on last mile delivery. All the slots online, you can see most of them are all taken up. Myself, recently when I tried to order via Tesco over here, I tried to go online and book a slot, and I can see for the next 3 weeks it's all taken up. So there's challenges on air freight as well. In terms of the healthcare sector, we can see, for example, the GP clinics, the general practitioners, their customers have dropped by 60 to 80%. Hence, some of them either totally close or some of them, they will shorten their opening hours. Some doctors resorted to use phones to be in touch with their regular customers. So what do you need to know in this situation? In terms of the services and tech industry, we can foresee that there's going to be a more demand for innovation across logistic optimization due to the logistic strain, as I mentioned earlier. There's going to be more innovation that's going to be on demand for retail sector, as consumers going to start being more social distancing and may not immediately want to go to malls once the situations gradually open up. AI is going to be in demand for health, online data, as well as digital marketing. Smart mobility is still going to be one of the areas that Malaysia is looking forward, especially now that people wouldn't want to be in a car too close with the driver. Grab has mentioned earlier before this pandemic that they are targeting before 2022 to have driverless taxis. However, there may be some delays due to this pandemic, but we can foresee that the trend is still towards that. Smart townships and interest on open data is still there. And Malaysia is still going to proceed with 5G implementation, albeit potentially with some delays. This is to implement Internet of Things, big data, as well as AI. So there's been a lot of multiple pilot projects done by Malaysia in 5G. In January, there was announced more than 100 projects. However, the focus would be more on practical solutions. On the retail side, I would suggest that you be updated on changing consumer behavior and new trends. As I mentioned earlier, e-commerce is booming. We like to refer back to the SARS epidemic that has changed the landscape for e-commerce in China. And we foresee that this pandemic will change the e-commerce booming in Malaysia as well. In terms of trend, we foresee that consumers will be more doing in-home dining, hence demand for dry groceries will continue to be up and sustained. There will be some consumers who like to buy more self-indulgence category of F&B due to them unable to get other types of entertainment during this period. Hygiene products will be prioritized, and during this period, Malaysians will be more open to experiment new products, especially if their usual brands are not available, hence they would be willing. There was a survey that said that a lot of them are willing to experiment new products. So customer experience will be the new brand currently. In terms of education and training, the Malaysian government hasn't asked for students from overseas to come back. In fact, they've been asked to stay back wherever they are and continue their studies based on what their respective universities have updated them moving forward. Intake on student, there's going to be an impact on student intake in Malaysia due to public exams postponement. Hence, university in South Australia may want to predict maybe there might be impact rather than students taking 1 year to finish their exams. Now it might take more than 1 year, and hence February intake may have an impact. So there's going to be more demand for home-based learning solutions, and technology content would be important to help mediate infrastructure challenges as well as compatibility issues. There is an existing demand now for tech to convert offline content to online content transfer. So if there are companies who have expertise in this, please reach out to me. Of course, corporates are also cutting down in terms of their trainings. However, digital skillings, we can foresee there's going to be a demand in that as they start to try upskill their employees to start be working remotely and how to utilize digital capabilities. In terms of health and medical sector, I've mentioned earlier there's going to be more PPE demand in the market. The ASEAN governments have set up a COVID-19 ASEAN Response Fund. You may want to check more on that in case if you have some stocks that's not required by domestic market in Australia, and if you are interested to export that to ASEAN. Malaysia has started several clinical studies on drugs to treat COVID-19 patients. Hence, if there's any research going on in Australia as well, and you would like to partner with Malaysia, please do reach out to me. Hospitals are doing delivery for their drugs and medicine, and we can foresee there's going to be a demand in future for telehealth and digital medicine for vulnerable groups, and for example, even for the GP clinics. So just to share some pictures again as well, this is one of the example of projects that is ongoing in Malaysia is a City Architecture for Tomorrow Challenge. There is done by Toyota Mobility Foundation and supported by the Malaysian Digital Economic Corporation. They are looking for smart mobility solutions, and Kuala Lumpur has been chosen as the city to trial this project. There's a cash as well as there's a reward in terms of supporting you to trial your solutions over here. As of now, the due date is end of April, but they have mentioned that they will potentially extend it till further notice due to the pandemic situation and MCO. So what is the new normal currently? I've mentioned earlier on the consumer's behavior and prolonged social distancing. So we can foresee that consumers will now prioritize health, wellness, and home care. You may want to consider that during this new normal situation, there will be new personas that you may want to target. There's going to be a market observer, for example, those who are going to start using more digital facilities, platforms to focus on stock markets or, for example, on financial literacy. There's going to be social citizen who's going to use a lot more of social media. Malaysia is a very heavy user on Facebook and Instagram. There's going to be an adaptive shopper who's going to adapt based on the current situation and see what are the promotions that's available. There's going to be the resilient one who is not too much affected with the current situation. There's going to be the bored homebody who unfortunately maybe they are laid off work and they don't know what to do at home. There's going to be the work from home professionals. So people, for example, like myself who are still working from home, and there's going to be the term called health nut as well as sad and confused. Also, not to forget, there's some people are now focusing a lot on fitness, as there's been a lot of advice to maintain your fitness to ensure that you have a high level of immunity during this period. We foresee that once the situations gradually relax, there's going to be a pent-up or revenge spending by the T20 households, and these are the segment of the society that we are targeting for our products mostly. Changes in business behavior, we can foresee that there's going to be push factor for SMEs on adoption of technologies in their operation, especially risk management, as employees will start want to avoid face-to-face meetings and more remote working. WhatsApp is going to be used more in Malaysia. So Malaysia is a WhatsApp market, unlike China, which is using more WeChat. And brand affinity, we've seen some companies have using this to get a positive payback. So I would suggest you to continue to engage your consumers. I've mentioned the above personas earlier. You may want to reposition your brands to these target personas. Please ensure that you address trust, safety, care, and value. Malaysians are very much value buyers. So you may want to target what value they can get by buying your products. Use creative advertising. I've shared in the previous webinar about some companies going towards shoppertainment. Media consumption is very heavy during this period, so you may want to use this to your advantage to connect to your consumers. And there's going to be more opportunities for you to convert trialists into loyalists. However, please understand local context. And for example, you may want to consider the festive seasons in Malaysia, which is different from Australia. Businesses are on tight margins currently, so any solutions that you want to offer to them, please target that something that is easy to implement. You can show evidence in terms of cost savings, productivity increase, or bottom line increase as well. And please work with your partners to navigate this new landscape. This market is about relationships and long-term relationships. Hence, it will pay you back in multiple dividends after this pandemic is over. Next, please. So e-wallets is one of the big winners during the current situation. As you can see in the picture below, a lot of the users have said they are open for more online grocery shopping in future, more online shopping subscriptions, as well as they are willing to be engaged with online or app to manage their rewards. This is a research that is done by Nielsen Malaysia. In-store tech, we can foresee there's going to be more demand in navigation app within the store as well as auto checkout. Examples of advertising in market. For example, I've chose wine sector for these examples. You can see some of the wine players, they've offered consumers to purchase their wines with some discounts, and by purchasing that, they can then join via Zoom to connect with the senior winemaker. In this example is from New Zealand for virtual wine learning. So these are some examples that you may want to incorporate in your products as well. Some wines, for example, the middle picture is a Facebook example. They understand that consumers are now cutting down in terms of their purchase and expenses. So they are offering free delivery as well as some what they call it as MCO promotion. You can see as well WhatsApp is being used. So consumers are encouraged to connect via WhatsApp as well apart from Facebook. Some winemakers have also tailored message their products, where, for example, in this picture, the example used is that when you can't connect with loved ones in person, do the next best thing and enjoy a wine with them virtually. So these are amongst of the messages that is being used in the market. So I don't want to use up too much of my time to explain about the market. Happy to share more later. I'm open to receive questions, but before that, these are the contact details of myself, as well as the Senior Trade Investment Commissioner of Austrade in Malaysia. We also have onshore support from you by DTI Adelaide for Southeast Asian market by Sonia. And please do not forget, DTI also have support programs for exporters on the ground, such as the Export Accelerator Grants, and Trade Start team are always there to give you assistance as well. Thank you, and I welcome any questions.
Thanks, Adil. That was absolutely extensive and fantastic. And you certainly shared some great visuals to reinforce how drastic the impacts are in market. We have actually got a couple of questions. Firstly, you mentioned earlier about understanding local context. Can you give an example?
Sure. Thanks, Ashley. So in terms of local context, in Malaysia, you may want to consider that the government has changed in early March. This is now a new government that is more conservative religiously towards Islam, and it's more Malay-based government. Hence, we can see the impact in early April, when initially the government machinery has allowed some of the beer brewery makers to operate, and then upon a public backlash and the government want to maintain their support in this current situation, they have resigned that approval. Hence, they've considered that non-alcoholic beverages are considered non-essentials. In terms of other example is that Malaysia is going to be entering the Ramadan period. So this is not just unique to Malaysia, it's the whole Muslim world. So towards the end of next week, Ramadan is going to begin for about a month. So during this period, Muslims is going to be more conservative. It's going to dress more modestly as well. Muslims is going to be spending food mostly for their eat during early morning or when they break their fast at dawn. So there's going to be impact in the market as well. We can foresee in that. There's going to be some colors preference as well. For example, Chinese New Year is red color. So during this Ramadan and Raya period, after the 1 month fast, the predominant color is going to be green. So some product manufacturers have changed their packaging to green color to capture the market as well. There's going to be more emphasis on family bonding during this period. So you may want to consider that if you are doing some marketing during this period as well. Thank you.
That's great. And to our viewers out there, it just appears that we're experiencing some issues with our videos. So thankfully, our audio is still working, but we are here doing the best we can under the circumstances. We have a question here from Ben Howard. How has the coronavirus impacted the migration market in Malaysia, And how do you suggest we adjust our strategy to adapt to the current market?
Okay. Thanks, Ben, for the question. It's still a bit too early to see what's the impact right now, because especially the main focus right now is on sustainability of your own finance. Right now, Malaysia, we can see that, as I mentioned earlier, most people are concerned about their finances moving forward. We can foresee that a lot of the migrants, especially business migrants, will be mostly in the top 20% or at least within the top 10 or 20% of the middle class, as well as the T20% of the households. They may have cut spending on expenses right now. However, we foresee that after this period, they may reach out to things that they usually purchase, or they may start to want to consider to do things that they were not able to do during this period. In terms of business migration, I can foresee that I don't see there's going to be a big impact on that. In terms of strategy-wise, I would say you would need to use the same strategy as I mentioned earlier, in general, for reaching out to consumers and businesses. You may want to reach out to your partners in market. For example, I believe one of your partners is Kitson Migration. Please be in touch with them more closely. You may want to see what's the current trend. I'm sure they are closely in touch with their own customers as well. See how it's going. For some of the business migrants who are already in the process of getting it approved, I'm assisting one of them currently, as they needed to export more South Australian products. So we are assisting them despite the freight challenges on how to be connected to our suppliers as well. In terms of investors, we're going to see based on how this impact to them. Short term, I believe there's going to be an impact, but medium to long term, it should normalize back again.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I'm sure that that helps Ben out tremendously. And again, we have got so much support here in the South Australian government. So please reach out to our connections for support. That's what we're here for. That's covered all the questions for now. Please continue submitting any questions, and we can raise after part 2 of this webinar. So please stay on. We have an expert from Austrade, KC, who is the Business Development Manager for Agribusiness, Food and Beverage. So welcome, KC. Let's hope the technical difficulties are well and truly past. Are you online?
Hi, Ashley. Could you hear me?
We can hear you. You sound fantastic. So, yeah, welcome, and we look forward to your presentation. Will do.
Will do. Could you pull up the presentation slide then? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming here today. Certainly happy to give you a bit of a brief in terms of an overview of the Malaysian market, but then contrasting it with how that has changed in the food sector under the whole COVID issues. So from my end, I'll just skip to the next one. If you can see the next slide, please. So just give you just a general brief on Malaysia. Most of you would probably be very, very experienced in understanding what Malaysia is like. 31 million population, 4.7% GDP growth, 11,000 per capita, top 11 trading partner with Australia, blah, blah, blah. Next slide, please. So why do you need to know all of that? Well, it's just for you to contextualize what that means. So as you can see, in terms of the population, it's predominantly urban. And if you look at on the right-hand side of the screen, these are the 5 major cities that we would recommend to target, mainly because of the high income bracket. Next slide, please. And as you can see in the household income use, hotels, restaurants, as well as food and non-alcoholic beverages constitute about 21.4%. 18% on groceries, and 13.4% in food service. Next slide, please. So another thing that you need to know is also the demographics of Malaysia. So out of 91.8% of Malaysian citizens, 67.4% are Bumiputra, or what we know as Muslim or Aboriginal in Malaysia. So then 24.6% is Chinese, 7.3% is Indian, and others. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the opportunities in Malaysia. Next slide, please. So Australia is actually fairly well known in Malaysia. As you can see over here in this slide, there's plenty of events to promote Australia, and hence the comment from Adil earlier with regards to supporting in terms of marketing. A lot of these events, Malaysians know Australia very well. However, sometimes you need engagement strategies within your marketing to help them connect with Australian products and the produce that you're representing. The reason why I say Malaysia knows Australia very well, there's tourism is a big factor from Malaysia to Australia. Education is a big factor, and there's a lot of migrants as well as Malaysians who have family in Australia, whether it's they are being PR or citizens. So and hence, by engaging with these marketing activities, you put the Australian products top of mind. As you can see over here, on the left-hand side, that's the South Australia program with one of the importers in the market, with the Clean Food Australia branding. As you can see on the top middle, that is at Isetan with the model cook, where she brings exporters into Malaysia to do their promotions as well and to introduce the product. The location of that supermarket is at central KL, underneath the Twin Towers, so you have a lot of high income and high traffic flow. So it's important to promote and market your products. Now, the one on the far right is actually Taste Australia program by Hot Innovation Australia. Hot Innovation works with Austrade to promote fruits and veg in this market for Australian exporters. In Malaysia, we've done quite a few programs. The main one for us is summer fruit and avocados. So the lady over there is a social media influencer who is talking to the media as well as social media personalities to how to cook recipes, and also give it a more local Malaysian twist. Other ways of engaging, as you see right in the middle, that's the Meat Livestock Australia Iron Butcher program, where they promote the use of meat products in towards the TVET side of things. Right underneath, as you can see on the left-hand side, that is at Aeon, where there's a new refrigerator that has been set up with the whole Australian corner. And as you can see on the right at the front there, there's a South Australian product, which is cauliflower rice. And last but not least is the Taste Australia program for summer fruit, which is the bottom right. That one, as you can see in the middle, there's a picture of Australia. What that is actually made up of summer fruit and all kinds of veg. It's a traditional yisang, where during Chinese New Year, Chinese people toss the yisang, a fruit salad, to symbolize prosperity. So what is the main objective of me showing you all of this? Is to re-emphasize the importance of marketing, but also localizing and contextualizing the Australian products to the market. Next slide, please. So key messages I would usually tell you in Malaysia. First, there's a growing median household income. There's also growth in retail, food service, food processing, and tourism. That probably has changed quite a bit as well. Halal is an opportunity for growth, as more than 60% of the population is Muslim, as well as make use of NAFTA, where there's 0% tariffs on 99% of the products. Next slide, please. Some of the key channels. So the retail sector is very very important, especially under the MCO, as Adil has advised as well. What has happened is essentially food service importers in Malaysia have reported only 20% of food service is open at this point. Most of the citizens, most of the Malaysian citizens tend to buy their groceries from online platforms, from the grocery stores, from the hypermarkets and supermarkets and convenience stores. One key change within this market is that Tesco was bought over by CP Group over the last few months. So what that means is within 1 year, Tesco Malaysia will slowly change to CP Group's branding. Another bit as well is GCH Retail is undergoing restructuring and rationalizing of their stores. So over there, they are cutting down in terms of numbers, but rebranding and refreshing the products that they have on hand. Next slide, please. So these are the major retailers in Malaysia. As you can see, Tesco is on the top left. That one will change slowly. Village Grocer and BIG, these are under the Food Purveyor Group. On the right column, all of that will be under the GCH Group. Jason's, Mercato, Guardian, Giant, and Cold Storage. On the left side, Aeon is a Japanese supermarket / department store. Isetan as well. These serve medium to upscale market. And right at the bottom is Jaya Grocer. Jaya Grocer is, like Village Grocer, is one of the locally grown grocerant, which is grocery / restaurant concept kind of retail outlet. And Jaya Grocer also has its online platform. Whereas the rest of them, other than Tesco, will be using online e-grocery platforms to distribute their products. Next slide, please. One other thing is the food service sector. As you can see, sizable and growing consumer food service market, more people dining out. That has changed quite a bit in this market due to the MCO and the COVID issues. However, what is happening with the food service sector is a lot of them are also going to e-delivery platforms like Food Panda, Grab Food, etc. in this market. Next slide, please. So these are some of the areas of opportunities within the food service sector. Next slide. And the other channel is food processing. So as you can see over here, Malaysia is actually a big food manufacturer country. Services over 200 countries worldwide, 10% of the manufacturing output, but most of them are in SMEs. Of course, also because of the strict halal regime over here, so some of the major global conglomerates like Nestle, Tesco, McDonald's, even Japan's NH Food and China's Sozo Global has set up manufacturing hubs over here for halal food. Next slide, please. So what's next? A few more pointers and things that you need to watch out for in this market. Next slide, please. So market access, be aware of the MAFTA and NZEFTA regimes that will give your products tariff-free treatment. Next slide. Be aware of the import regulations. One of your first points of reference should be the Manual of Importing Country Requirements by the Agricultural Department called MICOR. The link is over here in the slide. What you do is you Google, or you could also Google MICOR, M-I-C-O-R, Department of Agriculture, Australia. Next slide, please. Last bit is halal certification. Malaysia's halal certification is globally recognized, and hence that's why a lot of GLC manufacturing is set up in Malaysia. There are 6 halal certifying authorities that are currently recognized by the Malaysian government. These are the 6 of them in this slide here. Happy for you to take a photo. One other thing about halal certification is that meat and dairy are required to be halal certified irregardless. So halal meats like beef, lamb, chicken all need to be halal certified. and with dairy, they all need to do that too. However, with regards to the meat certification, that's a bit more stringent, where you also need Malaysian Islamic Authority to come down to Australia to audit the facilities before you can start exporting. Okay, next slide, please. And please, as Adil has also emphasized, you know, build that relationship with the local importer and distributor long term. This is an evergreen market whereby, while they don't take up huge, vast amounts like certain markets do, but they are a steady, long-term market that has engaged with Australia for many, many years. And one tip from my end, which is, I mean, I am the F&B manager, is that in Malaysia, food is a culture to nurture relationships. When an importer or a distributor or your contacts in Malaysia ask you out for a meal, it's for them to build that relationship, engage with you, and be able to talk in a more less formal kind of way. Only one other tip: never compare Singaporean food with Malaysian food, or else you'll never hear the end of it. So next slide, please. So that's about it in general about the market. So some of the things in the market that happened after COVID, as I've alluded previously, there are plenty of things that has changed and how that has affected the society in general. So one thing you might need to know is food service and hospitality. Most of them are either in basic skeleton mode or they are closed. In fact, my importers have quoted to me about only 20% of their food service suppliers are functioning during the movement control order period. Next thing is that while e-commerce is a boon for retailers due to the movement control order, most people will start requesting for delivery from the retailers. However, retailers are also starting to struggle to fulfill orders, and a lot of them are coming up with new and innovative ways, like, for example, WhatsApping your shopping list to the retailer. They pick and pack for you, and you arrive at the store the same day, pick it up, and pay it at the counter. In fact, the delay in fulfilling orders has gone up to 3 weeks now, and hence that's why it's important for a lot of the retailers to make sure that the stock supplies are still being sold via various methods. Another bit is be aware of air freight shipment issues. Air freight shipments due to the cancellation or delays of passenger flights from Australia has impacted air freight for food and beverage the most, whereby some of my importers are quoting up to 3 to 5 times air freight shipment prices pre-COVID. So meaning that before COVID, an AKE could be roughly around $900, and it's already gone up to something to the tune of 2,700 or even 3,000. Or they aren't unable to schedule their shipments onto flights. One other thing to be aware of, Adil has also covered it, non-essential businesses are not in operation. Unfortunately, alcohol importation is not considered an essential business, and hence we have had importers in this market who has trouble either accessing their stock that are in other markets, meaning trying to cross the land border is a no-go, but also shops, retail outlets are not functioning to sell alcohol as well. What that means is that a lot of the alcohol importers are going online, looking at e-commerce and looking at other channels to sell their wines, because their food service channel where they usually sell have also slowed. One last bit is to be aware of is the slowdown of government departments on the registration protocol for a lot of products. One thing that we have heard from the market is that the labeling and tax duty stamps sticker processing has also slowed significantly because the government departments are working, some government departments are not working at full force, especially in the non-essential sectors. So what we tend to recommend is to be aware of the conditions. If you have a good relationship with the importers or distributors in the market, talk to them, tease out what their issues are. A lot of the concerns are around shipping, price points, as well as storage and handling. One other bit that I'd like to flag, a bit of update on what we are doing, Austrade is doing in this market, is we are also working on an e-commerce program with the fashion platform Zalora. We are currently trialing products that are already in market, and we will roll out gradually as we go further into Q2, into new-to-market products, then into whether there's an opportunity to also sell on e-commerce platforms direct and fulfill direct. Zalora, just to give you a brief, is a fashion e-commerce platform. What has changed is that due to the movement control order, fashion is not considered an essential item, and hence they are looking to expand the product range to be able to continue operations, but also to sell and provide products to their clientele, which is in the upmarket range. So for those of you who are already in market, just be aware. We will reach out to you as we formulate and confirm the program in a more concrete manner as we go along. Last slide, please. And these are some of the few resources as well as reference sites that are in Malaysia. Things that you need to know. So, for example, veterinary services will cover meat and dairy. There's also a list of the halal approved abattoirs in Australia, approved international Islamic bodies. The reason why I raised halal as an important point is that if you want to sell into food service, that's where the volume is. Or food manufacturing, halal will be a key requirement for most of the importers. It's irregardless whether the product is actually halal or not, meaning that even if you're selling honey, which is halal by default, you still need that sticker to make sure that the food service provider or the food manufacturer can retain the halal cert and produce a halal food to sell into either the domestic or international market, and hence the recognition is important. And so my suggestion is, if you are looking into those phases, look at the Islamic bodies and reach out to them and talk about what does it take to certify and register your product. Other preferences, the Federal Agriculture and Marketing Authority, the Malaysian Food Act and Food Regulation, keep those in mind. And one last bit is Austrade is also doing constant updates on the Austrade website on the market updates and market conditions during COVID. All you need to do is go onto the Austrade website, go onto the news page and look for COVID, and there will be one page for COVID Insight. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, KC. That was a great presentation. For those of you still watching, please stay on for a couple of questions for KC that's come through. I know some of those tips that he's shared with us will be very useful to our local businesses. So while we're asking some questions, we're going to upload the poll now. So before you depart the session, please complete the poll so that we can use that feedback for future webinars. Thank you. So KC, firstly, someone has actually asked whether we can actually access your presentations. Would you have any problems sharing that with our companies?
That should be fine. We'll talk in the background to send it out.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. Another question. So the import conditions for dairy, seafood and meat into Malaysia, you have touched on it, but are there any import conditions?
Well, okay, with meat, for the import conditions in general, is that you need to be halal certified. You need to get an audit by the Department of Veterinary Services as well as the halal authorities. Once they approve, then you can apply for your halal cert as well as your export certs, and then you and then every shipment that you send the meat out, you need to also apply for export documents, etc. The other one for dairy import conditions, you need to be halal certified, but you do not need export. To certify the export documents by the halal authorities every shipment. And what was the third category again? Sorry.
It was dairy, seafood, and meat.
Yes, with seafood, the importers will need an import permit. My suggestion is for you to talk to the local importer. And as I said during the presentation, all of this information you can also search through my call. More specifically.
Sure. We do have one more question, so viewers out there, please submit any questions that you would like either Adil or KC to answer, and otherwise we'll close off the session. So final question at the moment is, how has freight disruptions impacted the supply chain in market, and how are importers adapting to it?
Well, with air freight, Malaysia is quite severely impacted, specifically on the fresh premium produce section, as well as the short shelf life products like, for example, yogurt, dairy, liquid dairy, etc. What that means is that shipping times have expanded. If you're looking into sea freight, a lot of products like, for example, salad leaves, strawberries, etc., can't come into Malaysia. Importers are looking at two ways. One, either they are looking at sea freight as an option if they can last, if their products can last that time frame, or they are waiting for they have stopped buying and waiting for the new set of air freights to come in. So my suggestion is that if you're looking to export into market, be very aware of air freight issues, and as well as the cost of air freight that may end up going into the bottom line of the importers, which then usually that spells a no-go for them in the long run.
Okay, that's great. Well, that's it. So that comes to the end of this webinar. Thanks so much, Adil and KC. It's absolutely been great to have you here this morning. We certainly went well over time, so thank you all for continuing to stay online and hearing from our experts in market. You have plenty of support, so please reach out to either Adil and KC or the teams here on ground in South Australia. That's what government's here for. We hope you can join us next Monday at 5:30 p.m. for the UK-Europe update with a special guest presentation from Wine Australia. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Adil and KC. Take care.
Thanks for having us, Ashley.
Thanks for having us.